Good afternoon and welcome to the second in our series of live webcasts on home working for Highlands and Islands Enterprise today. This one specifically targeted at employers who are looking at the area of home working. I'm Ian Forsyth, and with me today are Kathleen Wills of Vertex, Gillian Bell, who's a consultant who helps organisations to implement home working, and Donnie Morrison from High in the Western Isles, who has had many years experience, which he'll tell us about, in actually working with clients of Highs who have implemented home working. What we want to do today is to give you the opportunity to hear from these three people who have a vast array of knowledge about home working and how it can work and how it can be beneficial. But a key part of that is that we don't want to just have a chat around some of the things that we think are interesting. We'd really like to get your questions as well. And if you look just to my left, which is your right, you'll see that there's a discussion box there. You can type in your question. As soon as you hit enter, that will come through, and our team will fire them through to the screen in front of me, and we'll pass your questions on to a panel of experts here. So we really want to hear from you. We really want you to put in questions as well. That's a big part of what makes these sessions work. And of course, it also gives you answers to the questions you're looking for answers to. But if I can come over to you first, Donnie. High have decided that home working is a key element of what they want to do to help businesses within the Highlands and Islands. Can you tell me a little bit more about why home working in particular?
Well, it opens up new opportunities. First of all, if you've got companies across the area, they might not always have access to the staff that they require right on their doorstep. And of course, this is a well-proven method now of getting the people that they require, basically home workers. They can work from anywhere, and they offer you a lot of flexibility as well. So there are many benefits for a company in the Highlands and Islands, and clearly as HIE we want to make it as easy as possible for companies to thrive in our area.
Okay, and looking at the wider benefits for the area in terms of economic benefits in a more broad sense, where does High see that coming from?
Oh, well, there's huge potential for jobs. Clearly, many areas, again, if you want to work in an office, you might not really have an office in the youth community that you can easily get work in. And it opens out the whole of the area, regardless, even if you're in the hamlet at the back of the hill, back or beyond, you can still, as long as you've got a broadband connection and a telephone line, you can typically work for an employer, regardless of where they are.
Okay.
So it's new employment opportunities, really, that's our key interest, furthering the economic message, getting people earning money, which then gets spent in the HIE area. And
So from High's point of view, it's a win situation for everybody.
Win-win for everyone.
Okay. We do like those at the end.
Yeah.
Gillian, can I just get you to tell us a little bit about your background, because I know you were involved with Hilton and now you're helping other organisations with home working. Tell us a bit more about that.
Yes, I worked for Hilton, and it was about 5 years ago that we as an organisation got involved in home working, and it was really to overcome a challenge that we were facing at the time, which was it was a language centre covering 12 languages, and we were really struggling to get those languages within the central belt of Scotland. So a lot of brainstorming and soul searching went on, and we came up with the idea of turning to home working. And I suppose, to cut a very long story short, we ended up with 150 people working in their homes, taking sort of reservations and various calls for Hilton in all the different languages. It was at that stage that I just completely, I suppose, became really, really passionate about the home working model, because from a business perspective and from an employee perspective, I think, just to use your phrase, it was a win-win. The customer experience, statistics went through the roof. We were reducing costs, and it was just great to actually have a sort of the ability to reach a really high calibre of person that was out there really within the whole of Scotland. And it was using that experience that I sort of gained through the few years of doing that and going through that experience to go out and help other organisations. There's actually a home working summit that we were just discussing that is down in London actually on the 4th and 5th of July. If anybody is out there and interested in coming and hearing more from a lot of different organisations that are doing home working, then that's happening there.
Right, well maybe if we can remember that for the end, we'll let people know where to get information on that. So we'll leave that to the end and we'll come back to that. Kathleen, you've also had been fairly steeped in home working for the last 2 or 3 years with Vertex. Can you tell us a little bit about your experiences?
Initially, the key objective is we had quite a strong growth pipeline to bring in new business, particularly interested in bringing it into the Highlands, and we wanted to quickly identify that we could open our access to skilled resources without being in the proximity of a large centre, really. So we embarked on a trial, started the project about 3 years ago, recruited the team 2.5 years ago, and we're still now up and running with a fully retained team of experienced home workers that we recruited directly right into our home working model. So it's, as Gillian had said, the benefits to us as an organisation around reduced costs, but I think the benefits in terms of the access to work for the candidates has been a huge story of success as well, really, getting people into the workplace that would never have been able to get into a kind of centre of labour, if you like.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that's come across from all three of you, you've become very passionate and enthusiastic about this area, which is, obviously great. But if we could, you'd be forgiven for thinking just now, Hilton, Vertex, big organisations, perhaps you're looking at this from a perspective of a much smaller business. What we'd like to do is just take you to a clip of an organisation called Signpost, who are based in Inverness, much smaller than both Hilton and Vertex. But they have an interesting story where a member of staff, because of personal reasons, was going to have to give up her work. She didn't want to leave her job. The company, Signpost, didn't want to lose her. And they hit on home working as a solution to allow them to continue to have this valued individual continuing to work for them. So I'm going to just move you over to have a little look at a clip that features one of our other advisors, Cathy Lowe, and also Hazel Allen, the Chief Executive of Signpost, telling you a little bit more about their experience with home working.
Well, home working, depending on the size of the organisation, has got many facets to it. So a smaller organisation may be looking at it to retain staff, to reduce costs, office space being at a premium as it is at the moment.
We are considering home working for 2 reasons. The first reason is staff retention. I have a member of staff who is very valued, but for whom her home circumstances and distance of travel were such that she actually asked to resign. And we discussed with her the possibility of home working. She was very receptive to the idea, and now we need to put that into practice. The other thing that led us into considering home working is simply the cost of office accommodation. We're a charity, we don't have much money, every penny we use needs to go to our objectives, and the increasing cost of accommodation, of heat and light and so on, has led us very much into exploring more effective and economic ways of working that don't involve renting a large office in the centre of town.
Larger organisations, it is can be quite a major cost saving for them. Once they've got the implementation and the setup in place, there's quite a major saving in financial terms, but also for work-life balance for people, flexible working. Within various industries, there's peaks and troughs of when they require people, which when you've got somebody sitting at home is more flexible to work to. Okay. It gives, from a business perspective, the company huge opportunities to reach out to people who they maybe would never get through their doors. People who've got huge experience and life skills who can bring a lot to their company, but location, limitations of transport, where they couldn't do that, so they wouldn't come and work for you. opens up a huge population of people. From the employee side, it gives a lot of work-life balance, whether it's childcare, caring for somebody else, or just, I don't want to drive 30 miles to work.
And the third thing, and it goes back to cost, is that our employees, again as charitable employees, are not particularly well paid. For them, the rising cost of travel is a significant factor in considering their net take-home pay, and some of them do travel quite some distance. So for them, it's an additional benefit to be able to work from home and save themselves that time and travel cost.
Here in the Highlands, we have a lot of far-flung communities where I want to work, but I can't get there. It's not cost-effective. But I can work hard, and I will work hard in my home and produce the same, if not better, because I'm independent and I'm going to push for making sure that I'm good at what I do. For the voice aspect, it gives you a lot more flexibility, where you have your high peaks and troughs through the day, where somebody might want to work 2 hours in the morning, between 6 and 8, say, and you have got another peak over lunchtime. They'll do that, and then maybe they'll do another 2 hours, 8 till 10 at night. Fits in with their life balance.
I think the thing that really was the trigger was Yvonne, my employee, who said that she basically couldn't come in anymore. She's, as I said, a very valued employee, and we didn't want to lose her skill set. And that's what really took us there. I think we'd already acknowledged office accommodation as an issue, and we're looking for alternatives that are more economical, and weren't finding very much. But I think Yvonne was really the trigger. The employee retention issue was really the trigger for us moving into it more deeply.
Let's move on to the first question that's come in from the audience, because I think it's important that we deal with questions as they come along. Someone's asked about how we selected the people for the panel, which is an interesting angle, but I think we should deal with that anyway. There's lots of us out here that use home working, and we weren't approached for our input. I would have thought, Donny, I probably do want to hear from people out there who are already involved.
Well, absolutely. It's very difficult, actually, for us to find all the people who are involved in this. It's almost like a market that's not always apparent to people. You know, I think if you go in any village or town in the Highlands and Islands, there are people who are working as home workers. But quite often, other people in the village or in the town wouldn't have no idea that they are working from home. So we're really, really keen to identify people who will champion this. We don't want to sit here in webcast doing this ourselves. It's a far more powerful message when other people who have had the experience are relating their story. So, you know, we welcome anyone coming forward and identifying themselves as having experience in this area.
Yeah,
be delighted.
Okay, so get in touch direct with yourself. We've got contact details out there. Yeah. And I mean, I think you made a point as well, Kathleen, that I think part of the reason that you're here today is you certainly worked very closely with High during the project when you were implementing homework. Can you say a bit more about that?
Yes, obviously Vertex were an account managed site in the Highlands, a large employer. But at the offset of commencing our trial, I hadn't had exposure to it myself, so I kind of counted on the support of High and their associated partners who had that experience, and actually brought them together as part of a project team to help me make my initial project a huge success. So we got great support from High throughout that, and I'm a spokesperson that's always willing to work with High to help support economic growth in the Highlands, so it'd be great. I also would love to hear who else is homeworking out there as well, so that we can catch up for my next phase of expansion. So,
okay. Yeah. So, you know, we really don't want to ignore people. We want you to get involved and to talk. So get in touch with High and tell them your story, and who knows where that might go. Can we just, though, have a little look at the kind of fundamental question of home working from a business perspective? What are the key advantages for a business in your experience?
Certainly, Angus, I mentioned briefly in the introduction, for me it breaks down into two huge areas, and that is the improvement in the customer experience, and the other side of it is obviously just the cost efficiencies that you can get from a business. The customer experience side of things is just, I think, as Kathleen and Donnie have mentioned, you can reach out to just a completely different, demographic, to use the fancy term, a different type of person who's going to be attracted to home working, and therefore you get a better calibre. They're normally sort of older, more mature, have had more life experience, usually more qualified, and that enables, it's like a sort of customer engagement to be much more improved, and by that the customer experience just goes through the roof. And that was one of the huge experiences that I certainly had when we introduced it at Hilton, and any clients that I've worked with certainly had that. Obvious advantages is like the reduced facilities cost, because you have the rental and the electricity and all the other sort of associated costs with that. But just the increased productivity, increased retention of staff, usually by up to about 30%. Increased attendance, or by that I suppose the negative is reduced, absenteeism. People are in their homes, they'll make more of an effort to be there, they'll be more flexible, they don't have distractions. So it's all these sort of little sort of improvements add up to just a sort of, it's like the seen in the very obvious facilities costs advantage, but all the other associated sort of advantages that go along with the home working side of things.
So it's like the sum of the parts? Or
yes, it's like too huge, and it's just all the different bits underneath that.
Kathleen, we'll just come on to you. I mean, I think it was 2009 you said that your own pilot started with Vertex. Looking back to that time and thinking about, what were the things that you had to think about as an employer moving over to using home working? Can you maybe share some of that experience with the viewers?
Yes, I think that the initial objective really was to, one, understand if there was a labour market out there that were interested in doing it in the Highlands. So that was one thing that we wanted to identify throughout the project, was to open it up to see what the interest would be like in the Highlands. And I think from advertising the post and with support from High, within 3 days we had over 200 applicants. So we ticked that box quite quickly. I think working for a prestigious local government, Westminster City Council, data security was obviously a huge importance for us. And some companies are a bit reluctant, worrying about data security, and that there are no barriers. So I think that was one of the key components, the security. I think getting the people trained sufficiently was a key factor, because we wanted to make sure that we selected and recruited the right people for the home working trial, because it may not be right for everyone. So the recruitment and getting the right resources in was a key priority for us. And then training them and making them feel confident, because all the people that we recruited hadn't worked in a home working capacity before. And fundamentally, we're working, in the economic climate it is at the moment, with a huge focus on cost savings for our key client as well. So that dramatically supported a reduced operating cost. So those were the key factors, and obviously well-being of the staff thereafter throughout that trial, and supporting and managing them remotely was a big learning curve for us. And I think we've had a retained staff over that 2-year period, so it's worked really well.
But obviously all of those factors have worked for you. You're continuing that. It's become embedded in what Vertex does.
Yes, definitely.
Just a little comment here. I don't want to miss this, because we will make sure that we come back to this. But Kathy has suggested, how about a Highland Summit for home working? So that's one for you maybe to pin to the wall, Donnie, to discuss later on within High.
Be delighted to see that happen.
Okay. So we have noted that comment, Kathy.
It has been raised before.
Has been raised before. Well, we may see something sooner rather than later. I'd just like to go over to a question from Mark here. He's asking about the general case for home working is very positive, but what are the unique challenges of this model? For example, how do organisations manage quality control and performance management? We had a very similar question on the employee side. So quality control and performance management.
Two great points, and I think the very simple and quick answer, which I'll give firstly, is very, very similarly to you would do so in the organisation just now. Obviously depends how that's done, but if you're talking, for example, a sort of contact centre environment, or a sort of large environment, that is normally, it's like a sort of process, driven and a systems driven thing. So it's very, very similar, because that can then just be rolled out to the home working environment. And same for performance management. A slightly longer answer is that what certainly do find on both quality control and performance management is, because of what I mentioned earlier, the calibre of the staff and this different type of demographic, older, usually sort of with more sort of life experience, managerial experience. They've made a sort of life choice to take a different path. They actually don't need as much sort of management as such, as much sort of TLC, and it's really just, I suppose, everybody in the office environment getting everybody's head round the fact that you can manage who you can't see, and really how often are you sort of looking and managing the people that are in your office anyway. So as I said, the short answer is similarly to Will, you do so in the office. However, you'll find that it's slightly different with the home workers. You can actually take more of a sort of backward step, and there's the whole trust thing comes completely into play, and the whole, when you see this, your sort of your statistics, your sort of key performance indicators increase, that's when you become very confident that this is working.
Right. Yeah, because I get into trouble. I think it was from you, Kathleen, earlier, for using the out of sight, out of mind analogy. Not just into trouble, you accuse me of being old, really, with that. Which you're absolutely right, but that's obviously not an issue from your point of view.
No, I think obviously we paid great attention at the offset to make sure that our coaching and training methodology was suitable for remote workers. So, and I think I said in the earlier webcast, for training and coaching and development is pretty much the same as the staff on site. And the peculiar thing that I mentioned earlier with e-learning and distance learning tools, we have 300 people in a big site location, but we have maybe 10 or 15 at the time doing e-learning, not actually interacting in a group. Right. So the methodology can be adapted both on-site and off-site.
So it works both ways around in effect?
Yes, and I think it's important when companies are setting this up to make sure that they do have a huge focus on how they're going to manage the staff thereafter in terms of giving them ongoing support and training. Right. And that was a huge successful part for us, so which we've now embedded some of those methodologies now onto the site. Right.
And I suppose related to that, Donnie, from High's point of view, I think some of the work you've done in looking at productivity in relation to companies who are involved in home working, there was some interesting stuff come out of that, wasn't there?
Yes, I think the experience really on pretty much all home working initiatives, pilots and what have you, is that productivity is distinctly higher from people working from home. They don't have the same distractions, and we heard some of the other reasons, maybe maturity or whatever the other reasons might be, but it's fairly consistent. In one example that we looked at to do with legal secretaries working over the internet for law firms in London and Manchester, productivity was 30% greater than legal secretaries working in the office. And that was just a huge bonus for the organisations involved.
Right.
That's a huge gain. And I think you had maybe not quite up.
About 20%. 20%,
yes. Even that.
That's a 20% increase in productivity.
Yes. Right. So we contributed that really to the focused resources and the less distractions in a large office environment. Yes.
Yeah. I think these are pretty much reflect the average increases that you can expect.
And as Gillian said, not to undermine the quality improvements of those remote workers as well, was definitely one of the key metrics that we've seen as part of our project.
I think quite often you get questions being raised, how do you know people are working and all that sort of that's real sort of chestnut with home working. But in reality, the opposite is true, that you have to be, from maybe a health and safety perspective, be careful that people aren't actually working too long hours at home. There's a tendency to overcompensate for being given the privilege, if you like, to work from home, that people prove that they're worthy of the trust. And certainly our experience over years has been that you maybe get more hours than you bargained for, from people working from home.
Right, so almost an enthusiasm kicks in. Yeah. Okay, we've got another question from Linda here, And it's quite a broad question. It's what are the practicalities in using home workers? Now we've touched on some of them already. Are there others that we've not looked at so far?
I mean, just quickly off the top of my head, I think it goes into probably three main areas. But for me, the priority is to get the people right. So either if you're moving people that already work for your organisation home, is to make sure that they really want to do that they're aware of what it's like. It's not for everybody. And if you're recruiting, make sure you've got the right recruitment process so that it's like people can use systems well. So it's maybe do some sort of systems testing as well as the behavioural and the sort of normal sort of competency interview questions. Other practicalities is the sort of IT setup. Very, very, very simple. We were talking earlier that it's as simple as you have a little dongle and you can get access to the systems within the company and the setup within their house that they've got. All companies are different, but that they actually have a chair, a table, a quiet environment to work in. I mean, it is as basic as that. And it's just the from the product side, it's the training, just making sure that you can reach them by training, and that your processes can adapt, to home working. So there's so a few sort of practicalities, but it's.
And I suppose, as you kind of touched on there, it will vary
it's hugely broad.
to
Yeah,
another.
it changes for
But
every
those
organisation.
three headings are the kind of key things from your perspective.
Yeah.
Does that stack up with your experience?
Yes, I think really making sure you have the right people at home that can actually take responsibility for their own health and safety, their working environment. We've got an onus to make sure that the well-being of the staff is managed throughout the process. So selection and preparing them in advance for working from home is a real practicality that you need to spend a bit of time on.
Right, okay. I've got one here from Mark, who's interested in knowing about how DPA is covered, health and safety aspects perhaps too, and also interested in knowing what laws to be wary to look after company and staff members working from home. So I suppose it's all about people's welfare if they're home workers. What's your sense of that?
I think if I can answer the initial one around Data Protection Act, I think we'll all know that both companies and individuals are responsible for adhering to that Act. I think for us with Westminster City Council, every home working model is different. We provided specific terminals that couldn't print, etc. We put in a specific business telephone line. We ensured the contracts of employment were clear to ensure that staff had to be in a remote room that was not going to be accessible for any family member or anyone else during the working hours. Certain protocols were put in place around the closing down of equipment, etc. So, and the onus again is on the individual as well around protecting security. But we had no challenges at all in getting that signed off with our kind of local government partner. So.
Right. And obviously they'd be fairly stringent about all of those things.
Yes, absolutely, And just quickly on the health and safety aspect, again, every company has different models. We chose for our initial trial to go out and do an audit of the home working area. We've moved away from that now, and we can actually do room plans and remote audits of the rooms. We did a kind of health and safety audit at commencement, making sure they had all the equipment and were using it appropriately. We focused then on heating within the environment, lighting, etc. So we focused not just on the equipment, but the wider working area. And then just internal process around monitoring and auditing health and safety awareness for an employee. We do remotely with all of our staff on site as well. So we keep a close eye on that, and if we have to speak to people directly around audit results, then we'll do that via teleconference.
Right. What you obviously talked about there is a situation where you've supplied equipment for people. I assume there must be other circumstances where individuals are providing, maybe using their own computer. What are the implications there for data protection and health and safety?
Sorry, I'll let you.
Yeah, that's now well proven as well. Julian mentioned a dongle earlier. Typically now, if someone is using their home computer as part of their employment, a dongle is provided which locks down that computer and means that no information goes across that barrier. So basically, all the work you're doing for that company doesn't go anywhere near your hard drives or anything like that. It's not saved on your computer, and when you finish, all of that has disappeared. So it's total security, really. I mean, you're as secure at home, somebody working at home, as you are basically in the office, and that's well proven now.
Right.
Otherwise, you wouldn't see all the financial institutions and others who are now adopting this model. So it's well proven, and not.
And even
not
companies
used.
that have to be PCI compliant, there are ways,
Yeah,
round that as well, where people either sort of tap into their telephone the
Mhm.
numbers, or it can be actually masked out on the screens, and these are very, very, very simple
Okay. so
and solutions.
can I just pick up on that PCI compliant? I'm
Yeah,
sure
it's
I'm not
the-
the only one that's sitting there going, what does
It's
that
like
mean?"
this a credit card payment
Right. Okay.
side of things, so it's just that if you're taking payment for credit card over the phone,
Right.
a lot of the financial institutions have to make sure from compliance perspectives that they're actually complying,
Right, okay.
complying with compliance, and that is like this sort of perceived barrier to
Mhm.
home working as well, and that it's just there's lots of companies and with solutions out there
Right.
that work very, very easily. So,
I mean, the question is, I'll come back to the audience questions in a second, but something that's going through my head is, you're talking about all of those things. It sounds like just about any security, health and safety issue could be solved.
yeah.
But it also sounds as though that could be getting on the expensive side. Is it costly?
No.
No. Oh, that was a quick answer there.
No.
No, I
No,
mean,
absolutely not.
if a company is getting involved in a large-scale pilot, they will implement various things to make sure that from a technical perspective, they're doing this in the right sort of way.
Right.
And there may be cost to the organisation at that point. But when they come to deploying it out into people's homes, there's very little cost involved. Like the dongle itself is not going to cost a huge amount of money.
Right.
And it's surprisingly low cost, really.
Mm-hmm.
There's no hugely expensive components. Some companies prefer you to use your own PC because then you're updating it.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
responsible for updating it and so on. Whereas if the company provided, there might be issues with having to send an engineer out or something
Right.
because it's their computer rather than yours. So the original model was pretty much a company supplied the computer. And I think that's moving now much more towards you could just use your own computer,
Yeah. Right.
and there are security things in place, and it allows you total flexibility.
And from a company
Mhm.
perspective, that's
Yeah, and not least the
Cost.
space one as well. I mean,
Mhm.
not every home has got room for
yeah.
Yeah.
yes, more than one computer and all that sort of stuff.
And of course, I suppose if you offset those costs against the savings and the increases
Exactly.
in productivity, then
Exactly.
actually,
Exactly.
it makes perfect sense to go down that route.
Yeah.
Okay, I did say I'd come back to the questions from the audience. I've had one here from from Mark again, interested in knowing the benefits and challenges of paying people on a unit rate basis to complete work from home. And can that be done fairly from the company's point of view and the staff's point of view?
Yes, I can certainly answer that because most of what we've seen over the years, a lot of the early work was done in this way. A lot of people now just have people on the payroll, but certainly in earlier years, there was a lot of piecework related thing, and it worked very well. Basically, if you weren't fair as a person offering the contract to a home worker, they wouldn't continue working for you. And things like legal secretaries, for example, were paid on the basis of something 55 words per minute as the average that everything was set on. And most of them were doing 80, 90 words a minute, things like that. So they were well catered for, and nobody ever complained and said it's a very poor rate. So if you're not getting the right rate, if you're not paying the right rate, then you won't attract the people to do
Right.
it. It's just
Market
not-
forces
market
kick in.
forces, absolutely. But certainly there's different models out there, and it's evolving all the time.
Right.
But piecework in itself, it gives the home worker flexibility as well,
Yeah.
because they're able to do it within sometimes their own time. Maybe they prefer to work in the evening. We know of certain companies that just look for 15 hours a week minimum.
Mm-hmm.
The reason with the 15 hours is that they basically think that anyone working less than that is not keeping up with the things that are changing in the business.
Yeah.
So the 15 hours is a good optimum figure, and they don't mind whether you work that as say, 2 7.5-hour shifts or in 1 hour increments throughout the week.
Right. Right.
So huge flexibility, and that's the benefit of the home worker as much as it is to the employer.
Okay. Another question from Mark, which I think is a very interesting one, and really keen to put this one to you all. In terms of how home working might fit with different models, for example, particularly in relation to qualitative or quantitative outputs, how could that have an impact on supervisory models? So I suppose he's talking about a wider measurement of how things are happening rather than just the stuff you mentioned earlier.
Can I, sorry, Gillian.
It's all right.
Yes, we've obviously talked about some of the kind of key benefits, haven't we, and efficiencies, but there's certainly from our experience, typically on an on-site we'd have 15 FTEs worth of resources to one manager.
Right.
But that model for home working has gone up to 1 to 40. So,
Right.
so there's huge resources in management costs, support costs, as in coaching and training costs. Training's been a big success for us as well, because obviously for the home working piece we've had to go full speed ahead in terms of our distance in our e-learning. We're now using that methodology to save to create savings in the office environment as well. So we're not having to have a trainer stand up to deliver to 2 or 3 people. So there's more savings than just the facility savings and the productivity savings.
And certainly just on the training point, what certainly found with the companies that I've dealt with, that the training time actually reduces by on average about 25%.
Right.
Because people are just getting through it so much quicker, and I think Kathleen agrees with that as well. So lots and lots of other
Right. Yeah. And we do only have 45 minutes,
exactly.
so we could go on quite at length. Just a very specific question here from Kay. You may or may not be able to answer it, but she's taken the time to put it in, so let's make sure we get it out. The issue of headsets in terms of what specifications are to be used.
I could pick up that one. I think probably, I don't know if I'm reading into the question, but it's probably perhaps thinking about somebody in their house, and if there's like maybe sort of lorries going by and sort of like this sort of background noise, and actually one of the headsets that has certainly worked well, a lot of companies use it, is the Plantronics headset, because it actually does diffuse the noise that's actually outside. But if you actually think of a working environment, and people are tapping at computers and other people beside you are answering phones, in the home, it's actually better, because there's just less noise and maybe some distractions, but it's much less. But the Plantronics headset that takes out all does take out the background noise, so all you're really hearing is the voice.
Right. Including the dog barking.
Including the dog barking, and yes.
I speak from personal experience. Right. When I work at home, that's the one that always gets me.
The dog will be in another room, of course.
And it has to be well behaved.
Exactly.
So a bit of dog training involved.
Yes, absolutely.
Another one from Kay. In situations where home workers are logging into the employer telephone system, how does ICT ensure security against things like phone toll fraud? And she goes on to talk about something on Channel 4 last week, but let's just deal with that. Is that something you're not familiar with?
I haven't heard of that.
No, I haven't either, no.
Right. Okay, well we have to say...
maybe have Kay here with us too.
Yeah, absolutely. We have to say that with this one, we don't have an instant answer for you, but we will do our best to try and get one for you, and I think, I will pick up on that.
I can add some to that. Certainly with some of the companies that are employing home workers in the Highlands and Islands area, the telephone connection is directly linked to the IP address of the PC, and security is achieved through that. So basically, it means that a call can be to a contact centre, just like going to another desk in the contact centre, just going to the person's home, but the data related to that call needs to go on the PC in front of the person at the time. So the two are integrated, and they're pretty much tied together.
Right.
And security is achieved through that. So.
Right. So in your experience, that's tended to deal with that issue. But it
Yeah,
may be
there may be another issue, not one I've ever heard of, quite frankly, there to do with tools.
Okay. Conscious of time marching on here, so what I would like to do is to take you back to our other business signpost in Inverness, where the Chief Executive, who you heard from earlier, was talking about some of the reasons why they've gone down the route of home working. This short clip will tell you a wee bit more, bring you more up to date in terms of what's actually happened, and indeed what their plans are for the future in relation to home working. So again, a small organisation in Inverness, the benefits of home working, and where they're going to go next.
Yeah, I think in order to get the maximum benefits for the investment working and home working for Yvonne, actually what we plan to do is to roll it out to other employees as far as possible, because they do perceive it as a benefit. One of the things that we'll have to do to enable that to happen is to look at each job role and decide with the employee what part of that job can readily be done from home and what parts of that job actually require them to be in the office for whatever reason. And office-facing work will tend to be those that involve clients. When do they actually have to be here to meet with their clients? Because our client base will tend to be people who are in Inverness and near, and who actually want a physical presence. They want face-to-face. They don't actually want to pick up a phone as the first point of contact. So that's the thing I think that's going to decide very strongly how much home working every person can do. Yes, absolutely. I think, as I said, it's enabled us to keep a very valued employee. It's actually going through the process of home working has helped us become more effective as an organisation. So the questions of technology and so on apply equally to home workers as they do to our offices in Nairn. We hadn't got the right technology for Nairn. Well, as a side benefit to going through home working, we're sorting that out. So it's making us think about running the organisation much more effectively at the same time as going through a home working process. And as I said, the employees are happier with it. They see the benefits for it, they're more motivated. And to me, all of these benefits mean that home working is so far been a very successful exercise.
Okay, so we heard from Hazel there about the advantages that she's found from home working, and the fact that now she has become an enthusiast as well, like our panel members. Just want to sign off today on a little bit of information about something which I have introduced, and it's part of the reason why we're having these webcasts today. And to come over to Donnie, I have just launched something called the Skills Register. Can you maybe say a little bit more about that and how employers might be able to benefit from it?
Yes, this is something that we had been running the Western Isles for quite a number of years and been very, very successful there. There's really a single point of contact, so basically if there's home workers out there who are interested in this kind of opportunity, it gives them the ability to put their hand up and say, I'm available, and put their details on the skills register. And then for the employer, it's a single point of contact as well, in the sense that the employer can post information to allow us to put in a newsletter that goes out to all of the people who subscribe to the skills register. That way you will find, that all the people who are interested in this kind of thing in the area who are on the skills register get to hear about the opportunity at your company. So it's a win-win situation, as we talked about earlier. Go to the HIE website, www.hie.co.uk, and you'll see the home working section there and the skills register link. And employers can come to us and say, I have an opportunity, I'm interested in looking at this model, and it'll be distributed out then. And we don't do any selection ourselves at all. We're not involved in any selection here. Basically, inquiries then go straight back to the company. So the employer, then it's almost like people have applied for a job at that company.
Okay, well that's an interesting development, and obviously, as you've said, it's hi.co.uk. You go to the HI website, you'll be able to find the skills register there. I'd just like to finish off by saying thanks to Donnie and Gillian and Kathleen once again for their input today. Take on board the comments earlier about, why were they invited and you weren't? Well, next time, maybe it will be you, and I think the idea of the summit is a good one, and I'm sure HI will do something over the coming months to explore that a bit further. Love to be able to give you concrete details, but the suggestion only came up 45 minutes ago, so we'll see where we go with that. So thanks very much for logging in. Great to have all your questions flowing through, and I hope you all find that there's a route into home working that works for you. Thanks again.